Our recording. Share this. Okay. All right. Y'all see my screen okay here? My PowerPoint.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Um, so yes, this lesson is the next three lessons. I believe it's three. The next three, 5, 6, and 7, we cover over 2 classes, and so they are a little bit more extensive. They have multiple parts within the textbook itself, and so we extended out. But this, I organized it, this lesson, my typical lecture, a little bit shorter today, so that we can cover the bulk of it on Tuesday next week. But this is about technology, and here we are having to use technology to do our class, and it more than ever is shaping our culture, I think, um, with the last couple of years, and that's what we're looking at. We're going to look at how, at the roots of technology, and how it shaped early civilization and into the 80s, 1980s, and in 2000. So we're going to take a glance at the history, but then look at the present and future. Um, so yes, this weekend on Sunday, it's a fairly short. I guess you could say short. It's not as extensive as far as the expectation of the assessments, but challenge 4, the word weaving. I've got an example up in the discussion board for you to take a look at, a word that I came up with a semester ago, and give 2 peer comments. That's on the discussion board. Tell the class on the discussion board for the unthing experiment, what you decided to do. We'll take a glance at that in a minute. And then the 14-day challenge will be at mid stride on that. We'll be at day 7. So if you can, just check in with the discussion board on that and say, hey, how's it going for you? I'm floundering, or I'm doing really well, or somewhere in between. And so yeah, just to check in. So, and then the next week, looking ahead, just briefly, we're going to be covering chapter 5 on Tuesday, and then getting into chapter 6 on Thursday, which is social structure. Today is technology, what we call infrastructure. Next week we'll get into social structure, which we'll look at gender, we'll look at family, and yeah, those are the 2 primary subjects that we'll cover in the social structure. So, yeah, any questions about the schedule?
No.
Okay, all right. Um, the unthing experiment. That's another kind of similar to, I mean, there can be some overlap. I mean, with how you interpret the unthing experiment, with how you're doing your challenge 3, the 14-day challenge. But this is something that you specifically want to give up in technology. Some of you are playing with technology as far as your 14-day challenge. You got to come up with something different than what you're doing in your 14-day challenge, of course. But your car, your chair, your phone. That's one that I flirt with every year. And some people do give up their phone for 2 days, and what they'll do is they'll use it only for communication, necessary communication. The fact of the matter is there are no pay phones around anymore. They just don't exist. And in our earlier, my life, they were in, 2 on every block. It was just like they were everywhere. So you had a dime, then it became a quarter. But yeah, it was omnipresent. So, but not anymore. You're going to be answering these questions. How does this technology, when you find something you want to give up for 2 days, you're going to another one that I've seen students do is the image one, is not to do any image, look at yourselves with any kind of image, or just staying away from, in a sense, staying away from the internet as well, and images in the internet. There's a dynamic with this overload of imagery that we tend to, this obsession with looking at ourselves and looking at others. It produces this objectification. Objectification is like a depersonalization of who we are. So that's an interesting consideration if you want to consider that one. So anyway, so you're answering these big questions after you do this for 2 days. How does this technology change my views and experiences? How does this technology change social relationships? How does technology create the need for our other technologies? And I do have this little paraphrased: extend the time for, as far as you need to, more than 48 hours if you need to do so in order to gain insight. You're used, again, the key of this is how we create our tools and the tools create us. How is it that the tools that we're giving up for those 48 hours, how is it that they have formulated and shaped us as humans, as a society, of course, within society, a culture? Any questions about this challenge?
So just the challenge is like 48 hours, and we just have to give up something, right? It's not 14 days, or it's just
No,
like 2 days.
exactly. This is a shorter giving experiment, you could say. This is 48 hours, or you can take it longer if you need to take it longer. But
Do we have to do like a discussion post before explaining our reason to give up that thing, or it's
well,
just at
you're
the
going to
end?
you're going to introduce on Sunday. You're going to introduce what you're going to be doing. Just introduce. So, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. And by the way, so I need some of you, maybe not in this group of folks, but there's been a couple people that haven't submitted their plan for the 14-day experiment. So that plan is important, and it's worth 25 points. So you cannot. I'll continue to accept that plan till I'll give it to the end of this week. But I mean, it's kind of pointless actually, in a sense, because the plan is there to help to facilitate what you're doing. But anyway, I'll continue to accept it this week. Anyway, okay, here we go. The reflection yes, Michelle.
I'm sorry. I had a question about challenge 5.
Yeah.
So for like the mirror, does that count as anything that can like make a reflection of yourself to you, like your phone camera or anything like that, or just like the glass?
Oh no, it's any kind of reflection. Exactly.
Okay.
Give up looking at yourself.
Okay. Thank you.
That's hard. It's hard. Any other questions about that challenge? Okay. So this reflection, after we're going to cover it for this, this class and next class, reflect on what this big idea means to you. We shape our tools, and our tools shape us in your personal life. And this, again, is to help get the ball started for your challenge. So, because it can lead into, if you reflect on this, and then can help you possibly formulate what you're going to do for your 48 hours. All right, so I'm going to introduce this this chapter, this lesson, with a video, part of a video from Professor Wesch and his field work. Well, it's actually not his field work, but it's the legacy of his field of anthropologists before him in the culture in which he did choose his field work. So this is a clip from a documentary that was made. So let me give you a little context. So in the 1960s, Papua New Guinea was still a colonial outpost of Australia, and Australia was wanting to bring Papua New Guinea up to "quote unquote" the modern world by introducing books, film, and other things, of course, but of cultural technology. And they sent an anthropologist, Edmund Carpenter, in to teach them about technology and how looking at their own images. And they had never seen themselves in reflection, and what you were getting ready to see is them being exposed to images of themselves for the first time. It's something else to see this. And think about it. So I've had questions before of, do they not have water? Can they not reflect on themselves in a lake or something like that? Their water is actually, all their water is streams. And so there is no standing necessarily water that they go and they can look at themselves. So here we go.
In the late 1960s, anthropologist Edmund Carpenter was hired as a communications consultant for what was then the territory of Papua and New Guinea. Colonial administrators were seeking advice on how they might use radio, film, and television to educate and develop remote regions. It gave Carpenter what he called an unparalleled opportunity to step in and out of 10,000 years of media history. He recorded and created some of the most remarkable events in local media history, such as the first time people saw their own pictures or heard their own voices. Carpenter says that when he first gave people a picture of themselves, they couldn't read them. To them, the pictures were flat, static, and lifeless, meaningless. Recognition gradually came into the subject's face and fear. You can see it in the film footage. One man seems to become suddenly self-conscious about his hat. Another retreats to his house, alone, staring at his image for over 20 minutes. He argued that the Polaroid and other recording media created a situation in which, quote, for the first time, each man saw himself and his environment clearly, and he saw them as separable. He says that when he came back to one of these villages months later, he didn't recognize the place. Houses had been rebuilt in a new style. They carried themselves differently. They acted differently. In one brutal movement, they had been torn out of a tribal existence and transformed into detached individuals. Lonely, frustrated, no longer at home, anywhere. Such experiences left Carpenter disillusioned about the effects of technology on indigenous peoples and concerned about the effects of media everywhere. I felt like an environmentalist hired to discover more effective uses of DDT, he lamented. I think media are so powerful they swallow cultures, he says. And media, he says, play no favorites. They conquer all cultures.
So, any reactions to this?
Just a
Thoughts?
question.
Sure.
What is DDT?
DDT. Oh, it's used in the Vietnam War by I think it was made by DuPont. Made in the Vietnam War, used for the Vietnam War, but it's a chemical, multiple purposes, but it's toxic and horrific effects.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And of course, the parallel is that saying that technology has a toxifying effect on culture. And yes, Michelle.
Oh, I was just gonna share my reaction.
Yeah.
I thought it was really sad, especially like the man that with his little hat, and he like took his little hat off, and I felt so bad for him.
It really is sad. It really is sad. And you think about it, this is at the moment of exposure, then the effects of the introduction to technology that we just don't really, we take for granted. We're so overloaded with it. And that's why I actually think it's a great challenge to do, is to give it up for 48 hours, looking at images of ourselves. It is sad, Michelle. I agree. It's like there's this sort of innocence, I know, that we all had before we all became so overloaded with imagery. I shoot film still for a reason, and I love the process of and the slowness of it. It's a way to sort of ground me personally, and yeah, Ingrid.
I was just wondering something. Is like, it's not the level of technology, because like you said, they never even saw the image, like the reflection. So it's just like it's kind of jumping. I don't know how many years of media, like in 10,000, what they say in the book. It's just like jumping all of them and bring them where we are. It's must be harder, no? It's like it's even like traumatic at this point. It's not even
Yeah.
a kid who discovering his reflection in the mirror. Is like completely an object who taking picture of your like yourself, and then you
Right.
have an object with your picture in it. It's like it's not the level of the technology, or it's just like technology. What do you think?
Well, I think that in this case, what we were seeing is the and it's because in Western world, we had access to images of ourselves before we started taking pictures of ourselves, right? So we had forms of technology that gave us exposure to images of ourselves. In this moment here, what we saw was, suddenly from ground zero to, level 100. And I think the trauma of that is what we were being exposed to. And then the aftermath of how it changed the culture down the road. Professor Wesch actually got to document some other things that happened in Papua New Guinea related to this. And yeah, that's definitely something we're going to look at a little bit here. But does that answer your question, Ingrid? Okay. So why don't we jump ahead a little bit? So 12,000 years ago, jump ahead, but jump back first, looking at the history. What we kind of date the roots of the kind of technology that we're used to today. Jump into kind of the precursors to that. So you got to go back 12,000 years ago, and there was rudimentary tools, and humans were foragers, and your tools had to be something that you could carry with you. So very minimal. And they lived, of course, in small, very mobile bands. So they actually had nuclear families because the smaller was more, there was less stress about when to move, and so it was easier to coordinate with smaller groups. So these political units were called bands, and we tend to idealize them as being egalitarian, although not necessarily completely 100% true. There definitely was some stratification hierarchy within band culture, within foragers, but less than what we have, to say the least. But they lived healthy lives, although they confronted, of course, they had problems with predators, and a lot were injured and hurt in hunting, but definitely healthier lives as far as food goes, because they had a variety of food and it was seasonal. Their food sources changed throughout the year, and so that variety is a key to a very healthy diet, actually. In today's time, of course, we definitely we can eat the same food year round, which is not a good thing. So this is the original affluent society, is how it is kind of termed as, and in anthropology. And again, there's idealization with the society, but just to say that they had what they needed, and it was not as far as starvation goes. They worked together. If one band had resources that another band needed, they would work together. And so yes, there was definitely some sharing that took place in hunter-gatherers that does not necessarily happen today. So around 12,000, 11,000 years ago, you can date sort of the end of the last ice age has always been dated to about 10,000 years ago, which was thought to be the start of the Stone Age, the Neolithic revolution. And what these tools were being used for was for crops. And so we know that tools were being made during this time period when people started to live sedentary lives, and they what happened during this time, this transformational time period, the end of the ice age, there was a warming period, and we're still in the same warming period. We're making sure the ice never comes back. Actually, our culture is, but this warming period, there was an abundance of hunting. We overhunted the animals. And there was for a period of time, there was a change in the weather patterns from season to season extremely. So it was really helpful to have food in stock. And so they started to huddle themselves near water and living near water, and using irrigation systems to plant crops. And so this helped create larger populations. And settled communities, sedentary communities in one place. This created larger communities, so therefore you have to organize these communities, and you create divisions of labor. You got the agriculturists, the people who farm, and you have therefore an abundance of food that allows for others to not have to farm. Maybe they become the government. And they become specialists. Anything that is a non-farmer is considered to be a specialist. So this really set off a pattern of changing human civilization, humanity in a big time way. And so again, going back to our model of culture, which is this 3-tier barrel model, the superstructure, social structure, infrastructure, we're always going to be coming back to this point of looking at how these three things, and then the environment itself, interact with each other. So you have infrastructure, technology. How is that going to impact social structure and superstructure? We're going to be coming back to that, so I'm going to skip over for now. So what we see happening with technology, as new technologies get introduced, it constantly is formulating what we call a luxury trap. So planting, for example, farming makes life easier. And that generation, that first generation who benefits from it, they don't want to see it go away. So they pass it on to the next generation, and the population expands in the future, and it just grows and grows. And however, what they're doing to themselves is making life actually harder as it makes things easier to some degree. And the question is, which weighs the most? I mean, the benefits of agriculture or the consequences of agriculture? And there are consequences to agriculture that are not really, not necessarily we don't reflect upon. That's what we're going to do here, of course. And but there's no turning back. This is the issue. We can somewhat redefine our relationship to agriculture, but we're not turning back from agriculture. We're not going to go back to hunting and gathering. So looking at the impact from the 18th century to present day, we used to be 90% of us were farmers. We had our own food source, back whether it was large scale or small scale. Everybody farmed to some degree. Of course, now we're at about 3% of the population actually are farm related, agriculture related. So this is the labor, this is the U.S. job market itself that tells the picture. So consequences of food, we have this population impact, we have a greater production of surplus and wealth, we have a greater diversity of products, we have a greater diversity of jobs as a result of agriculture, and we have these increased technologies that are just sprouting out of agriculture. So if you have more people that are less people that are dedicated to creating foods, there's others that have leisure time that they can create new forms of new technologies to hunt, new technologies to create habitats, and so this is something that it's so far-reaching. And when we have leisure time for a massive number of people, they can go to work doing other things. But however, the downside of it is less efficient. You think about where our food is created and how it's transported around the world. It is less efficient other than if you think about it, growing in your own backyard, the efficiency of that versus moving products around, globalized products around the world to distribute. It is highly, highly inefficient. And you also replacing labor with machines. And that's technology for you. Increased labor specialization. You have this development of inequalities of the people from the haves and the have-nots. You have a decrease in crop variation, and you have a decline in health. You have an increase also in social diseases. So all these things are, physically, we know that our change, because we can look at through medical anthropology, we can look at the change of the density of our bones, and how our crops impacted prior generations. So yes, and then stress. Stress of living is, probably considered to be higher today than it was then. Any questions about this or thoughts? So this is when we talk about other technologies, of course, planting, the world of agriculture is only one example, but of course that eventually evolved to other things, which today, of course, the modern day world of the luxury trap, email. So email does what? What does email do for us? How does email benefit us, and how does it hurt us? Is there a two side to this coin? Yeah, Michelle.
email kind of like informs us of what's going on like outside of our realm, um like for my job, they use my email to like send me like emails of stuff and events that's going on and like other job referrals, and also like if I wanted to I could also subscribe to a newsletter like New York Times or whatever and just keep up with other politics and stuff.
It increases our productivity, doesn't it? I mean, it increases our receptivity of information, and our distribution of information, right? It's a communication. I mean, and of course, when I say email, this is kind of dinosaur now, right? I mean, there's the generation coming up. Email is kind of a foreign, sort of a dated form of communication. But so productivity is great, but then we have less face-to-face interaction, less face-to-face communication, less calling people, less human interaction. And that's what all these technologies really translates into. You have cars, a great example in my criminal justice class, we talk about the impact of introducing cars in the early 20th century to law enforcement. And before that, cops walked their beat, and they did basically community policing before there was community policing. They were interacting with people, and it was a sort of a face-to-face knowledge of who the police were. And you put cars in the midst, and police are able to get to the crimes faster, but it cuts down on the amount of human interaction, and there's a growth in mistrust between law enforcement and society today that is, partly associated with law enforcement's use of technology and weaponry, and it's definitely more and more polarized than ever. So cars, definitely put us in a spinning out away from each other, although it gets us to places faster, and that's great. Electricity, of course. What was life like before electricity? We sat around fires and we talked to each other. We told stories. And we're going to look at on Tuesday how the air condition transformed culture in neighborhoods. So yes, really the sprawling concrete jungle of modern day cities. This is something that all this technology sort of accumulated and helped facilitate. Now that's the meta picture. On the micro picture, our individual physical abilities are just have been diminished dramatically, except for if you're a great athlete and you train. But the ability to run long distances, to be able to squat, many of us cannot do what those two kids are doing right there. And it's something that we're born with the ability to do, but as we go through our socialization, we lose. And it's painful to watch my two little girls. I see it happening, and that's what the chair does. That is what the chair does. Is sitting. It takes away our ability to actually squat. In some cultures, of course, around the world, they still how they interact is always in this posture right here, when they're sitting still. So, and just look at the impact of shoes on our feet. This is something that I can totally relate to. I had a horrible case a couple years ago of plantar fasciitis, and it's our feet are completely bound. They're bound by our shoes. They're contorted, and you look at kids' feet and how they can sprawl out their toes initially, but as over time goes, the shoes that we wear, although there's some great shoes that I now wear that open up your toe box and open up your toes, and allows your toes to breathe, so to speak. And that is really important, because how we walk, if we walk on our feet, the more surface you have to walk on, the less impact it has on your body. So your lower back and some of the physical issues that we have from the impact of the ground comes from our use of our shoes, as was mentioned in chapter 3, lesson 3. Any questions about this stuff? Any thoughts about it? Reactions? Excuse me. Yes, Michelle.
I was wondering, may I add something to like
Yeah.
when we were okay, so like I saw and there's a television show called Mysteries of the Unknown. It basically like just tells a bunch of history stories, like reenacts them out. And I like remember seeing a story where like around the invention of cars or like afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot more wrecks because for one, we didn't have two-way lanes back then, so people like would just drive wherever, and then like as a result, they would crash into each other, and like
Mm-hmm.
there would be more like collisions and people getting run over, and it was awful until like a woman decided to like draw a line on the road somewhere, and it helped a lot. And like there's more to that, but like that's kind of how we got the two lanes. And then there's also the issue when cars were invented of like jaywalkers. There are more instances where people were like getting run over and their accidents and like just like a bunch of drama with that along the invention of cars.
Yeah,
See what
and
you want to mention.
I saw a statistic just the other day about how wrecks have gone up dramatically this year, the last couple of years, but this year in particular, wrecks have gone up dramatically. I think after COVID, maybe we somehow or another somewhat, and I should have read the article, but I'm curious why this year, but I'm guessing just my mind assumes that that it, we've been trapped in our houses and not really driving as much, and might have something to do with it. We've lost the knowledge and the feel for the road, and we have new drivers coming in that have not been. Anyway, so that's it's an interesting dimension. What's the name of that show again, Michelle?
Mysteries of the Unknown.
Okay, yeah. I'm familiar with that show. Gotcha.
It used to be called Mysteries of the Museum, but for some reason they changed it. I don't know why, even though they didn't change the intro that says Mysteries of the Museum, but they changed the name, I guess, for contract reasons. I don't know, but it's really good. I recommend it.
Yeah. I've run into it here and there. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So Professor Wesch talks about his field work and how he saw a moment of time in Papua New Guinea in which they were introducing the census, and before Papua New Guinea, before he saw the before and after. He went out to Papua New Guinea and before they introduced census. So census is counting people and putting your names on the books. And they didn't think about it is in Papua New Guinea, not everybody had a name. You called each other by your position in the family, and so proper surnames didn't exist. So they had to go around and give names to folks and put them in books. And out of all that, which Professor Wesch details in the lesson, they decided to redesign their villages to put them in these rows, these nice linear rows to reflect the census books, and organize it based upon the writing of the census books. And before they had their huts were actually organized by kinship, and so you made it so your huts would be private with your kins, but publicly, you sort of protected with that privacy. So they stripped that all away, and only the people who could read or write which were 10 out of like 2,000, had the responsibility of in implementing this. And it was just, it was, you know, it was really, they forced people to go into these new homes, and they even destroyed and burnt homes from the old days. Well, the interesting thing that Professor Wesch points out is that after they had sort of made all these major changes, the people who were responsible, the ones that could read and write, they looked around and they realized aftermath that this was a wrong decision, and it was not good for their culture, and it was changing their culture. But you know what? There was no turning back, and it's sort of sad, but that's how technology is. It's like you take a step and drink the Kool-Aid, and often there's no reversal, complete reversal. You can somewhat semi change things, but you know, it's difficult to completely reverse things. So challenge 5, you are going to be looking at the relationship of technology. I'm going to skip through this. So the questions you're going to ask yourself is how does the technology that you're giving up, how does it impact other technologies? This is all in your prompts in your challenge. How does the technology that you gave up impact social relations, and how does the technology that you gave up impact your beliefs or values or experiences or senses? You know, so that's of course, just to, as we go into looking at some other things here in lesson 5 to be thinking about. So Professor Wesch left Papua New Guinea from his field work in early 2000s, around 2002, 2003, and he teaches at Kansas State. And he put his students at Kansas State to work on looking at what was happening in this early development of the internet, and he was documenting it with his students. How really in this, I'll show some of this. I think it's not too long. Let me see how long it is. It's 4 minutes. Let's see what time it is. So he documents how. Let me just show some of this, then I'll talk about it. So I'm not going to show all this, but to show that what he was doing in this video in 2007 was documenting how social media has basically evolved to be today accessible, how we can create our own media, right? So from HTML to X, it is a very accessible to the masses. XML is something that is it's responsible for all social media. So this is not just about information access, but it's also about human relationships, is what he was documenting. And so interesting, in 2007, when this was posted, early days of YouTube, this was clicked on and looked at more than the Super Bowl that year. The Super Bowl ads that year. And so, yes, there was a buzz about realization about there's something happening today that is changing our culture. And Professor Wesch became a little bit of a celebrity in the nerd world of the internet. But so before 2007, let's take a step back. Professor Wesch was just on a current of people who have been studying what this world of images and this world of technology was doing to our society. In the 1980s, the writer Neil Postman, he in his book that he wrote stated that that the land of TV, which of course in the 1980s we're talking about 30 good years of TV land, was creating a dynamic with culture that was based upon irrelevance, because a lot of what was in TV and still is entertainment. It's not important for us to pay attention to, but it's entertainment. It's there for us to waste our time with, and to in a sense divert our attention to things that are important. It creates, he was saying that it creates incoherence. It's fragmented. We have different messages coming from different angles. What's true, what's not. This is 1980s. He was saying this. So today, of course, this is even more, more of a reality. And impotence. Impotence meaning that we're watching important stories on wars, for example, but we really, after we watch it, do we do anything about it? Does it really change anything? So 1980s, Neil Postman was this cultural critic. He was right on the money. Then fast forward to the year 2000, Robert Putnam, another social critic, sociologist, he summarized what was happening at that time. That by looking at the world of social capital, social relationships, what was the baseline for all social capital? And what he was seeing in 2000, year 2000, he was seeing that club meetings were dropping by 58%. People eating family dinners dropped by 43%. Having friends over was dropping by 35%. And this is just, of course, a short list, but he looked at other things. We were becoming disconnected in the year 2000 from family, friends, neighbors, our society. And so more people were bowling, as he says in his book, but they were bowling alone. There was no more bowling leagues. There were some, but it was less. And so this was the baseline for his inquiry. So today we have what we refer to as a culture of loneliness that definitely is. I'm not going to show this, but it's pretty well documented that the internet is creating dynamic that makes us more connected, but also more isolated. So what we see in the year 2000, at the right in the moment in time in which the internet is getting ready to take off. YouTube still has not been delivered yet, but it's coming. So what we're longing for in our technologies, or what we're getting in our technologies, is not exactly what we were longing for in the values that we were needing at the time. And so This is something that we were longing for community, and technologies were giving us and getting ready to give us a load of individualism. We were longing for relationships, and our technologies were giving us independence. We were longing for authenticity, like true, authentic relationships, and technologies were getting ready to deliver to us a commercialization of relationships. Our relationships were getting ready to be profited off of. So this is something that we'll come back to this slide in a minute. But so 2003, really interesting moment happened. The first viral video took place, and what happened in this video, which I'll show in a second. 2003, there was a pop song that came out, a Romanian pop song, and from Europe, that traveled to Japan, where it was downloaded. I'm not sure how it traveled, because at the time, of course, internet was very rudimentary. Downloaded it there, and then there was they recreated the song in a mashup of animation, which made its way to New Jersey, where this guy, Gary Brosma, saw it, and this giant, this is when the internet was ruled by nerds, and he did this with it.
Alo? Salut! Sunt eu, un haiduc, și te rog, iubirea mea, primește fericirea. Alo? Alo? Sunt eu, Picasso, ți-am dat bip și sunt voinic, dar să știi, nu-ți cer nimic. Vrei să pleci, dar numai ei, numai ei, numai ei, chipul tău și dragostea din tei, mi-amintesc de ochii tăi, ei. Vrei să pleci, dar numai ei, numai ei, numai ei,
It's pretty addictive. And it was addictive at the time. It went viral, to say the least. The first probably viral video. When it was released, he released it on a little-known platform that I think was called Newgrounds, if I'm not mistaken. And he, it eventually, immediately on Newgrounds, it was seen like 160 million times. Today it is the second most watched video. I think it's got like 700 million watches. But what people started doing with this video is they started making their own. I mean, again, it's a small audience at the time, making their own versions of this and sharing it. And they really completely were like connecting to Gary and to his expression. And there was a human connection here that was pretty authentic, you could say. This is something that, of course, became the first viral video on YouTube, which was created in 2005. These students of Michael Wesch started studying, of course, YouTube, and started studying this whole dynamic, and they started posting videos of their own on YouTube. Professor Wesch's students did, and they were so awkward, and so just so self-conscious. But then, you know, of course, when you fast forward just a couple years after YouTube is launched, you know, 2015, literally just 8 years later, this is what you find. Oops.
And while there, maybe they'll tweet us their fan photo, BB. Now's the time, fans. Get on the Twitter with a hashtag of the whole thing, AZDataStrongFan, and you might see your fan photo at a Diamondback TV broadcast brought to you by T-Mobile. I mean, look at the one on the right.
Do you have to make faces when you take selfies?
Wait, one more now.
Oh, there you go.
Better angle. Oh, check it. Did that come out okay?
That's the best one of the 300 pictures I've taken of myself today.
Every girl in the picture is locked into her phone.
Oh, Lord.
Every single one is dialed in. Welcome to parenting in 2015.
So, yeah, this is a different reality than it was in 2007, and definitely has, you know, not gotten any better. But the social media platforms are, the users on social media platforms pretty much tell the story. Going back to 2006, and seeing the takeoff of YouTube, which Facebook, of course, and YouTube having just a overabundance of users, the growth of Instagram and WhatsApp, TikTok, Twitter. Twitter is kind of flattened out, of course. Look at poor MySpace. MySpace was the thing for a while, and yeah, not anymore. But yes, looking at the numbers here, kind of just mind-boggling. The number of users. What do we have? 7 billion people on the planet, and 2.6, 2.3 billion are on Facebook. So, any thoughts on this? Or any questions? Reactions? Yeah, Michelle.
I'm surprised not to see Snapchat on there. Like, that was popular, at least like when I was a teenager, and it still kind of is, I think.
Yeah. Snapchat is down there. It's down there in the second to. It definitely has taken a tumble. Yeah, Ingrid.
It's just a reflection of the disconnect, I guess. It's just that we are so caught up in ourselves that we connect by technology. We cannot connect just physically, I guess.
Yeah, what does that do to our relationships? What does that do to the to us as individuals and as a group? That's, I teaching criminal justice, I look at the world of mass shootings with my class and speculate on this. But you gotta date it back to social media and this sort of world of technology has disconnected us from human pain and human just humanity in general.
I think we are not able to recognize other people's emotion like truly. It's just like we see only like the good of humanity when he's on social media, like with those acts of kindness and people like filming themselves doing it. Like so weird to see that. It's really mind-boggling, I guess.
Yeah, we compose our for social media. We compose what we want people to see, and so we see the glowing positivity, but it's not real. It's not obviously not a full picture. And yes, I think we are becoming less skillful in reading human emotion. I think that's well stated, Ingrid. I think you're right. So let's go back to this what our values we're longing for and what our technologies are giving us. You have we need community, we need relationships, we need authenticity. We're not getting that through our technology. And this creates a cultural tension that it's a cultural inversion of what our technologies are giving us, what we are not really necessarily asking for. So what happens as a result is this inversion, and we start to we start to value things that we didn't set out to value. And this the culmination of what our technologies are giving us and what our values are. Our technologies are giving us this individualism, independence, commercialization. Our values, our community, our relationships, authenticity. Our new technology gives us new things that we start to value. We start to value those things more so than we did before. They tapped into a very, very vulnerable spot of who we are, and really, in a sense, I would say taking advantage of it, and that goes with the commercialization. So technology offers us connection without constraint. We value connection. We value, that's really the culmination of what we're looking for in those values is connection to humans. But the technology gives us connection without constraint. There is no limit to our connection, which makes us disconnected. Yes, Ingrid.
No, I forgot to remove it.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Do that too whenever I'm a student in the class all the time. Pleasure without constraint. So pornography. And of course, being able to go out in public if you are completely if you are insecure and you feel kind of self-conscious, we can hide behind our technology in public. The other side of technology, there's a negative side, and then there is a you could say there is an avenue for connection in technology. And this guy right here lost his baby, his child, to SIDS in 2007, and he tells his story, which I'll show a little bit of it.
Even though I was going to miss my little guy every single day. I needed an escape from reality, and when I came back to YouTube, it became that place. But I didn't feel comfortable being myself on YouTube anymore. I was trying to get away from the emotions that I couldn't control in my real life. And that is when my friends came to stay with me. April 17th, 2007. Creating characters gave me an escape. It allowed me to be silly. It allowed me to act how I wanted to feel. It became a form of therapy, a coping mechanism. And after a while, it brought fun back to YouTube for me.
So this guy had just a therapeutic experience with YouTube. Again, my point in showing you all this is to show you this. When technology comes about, there's good sides. There's multiple sides of the coin for all technology. It's beneficial, but it's also something that we have to keep in balance. And now we have to start to question what is happening with the virtual reality technology. Those that have spent time, anybody spend time on the virtual reality? Yes, Ingrid.
It's almost like technology came when we were already kind of like destabilized. We were not in balance, and so that just increased that. It's just the level of technology is just always come when we are not in balance. So we're gonna prefer virtual reality than reality, because everything is like what you say, super normalized or something like that. It's just like
Yes.
only the good,
Yes.
not the bad.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, that's the thing is like, it's got the potential for good, um, but you know, it's also got the great potential to do some serious harm to individuals and to groups. And virtual reality is really something we need to step back and look at. There's been some early studies that have come out about it, and it's said to, for those who spend a lot of time on virtual reality, when they step off into back into the real world, it's said to have a virtual hangover. Um, and there is this sort of sense of physical detachment that takes place. You're disconnected from the real world, going back into. There's a physical disorientation. You start to have a different orientation to your physical surroundings, but there's also this sort of physical detachment and disconnection. And then the next phase, for those who really go deep with virtual reality, is it creates this dynamic of derealization. Derealization is the feeling that the world isn't real. You become depersonalized, that the feeling of oneself isn't real, actually. And that leads to depression and mental health issues. And just to put this on steroids, what they're doing now with pornography is you can go into you can have virtual sex, you know, you know, again, coming back to lesson 3, Nico Tinbergen stated, a supernormal stimulus takes key features from the natural objects we evolved to crave and magnifies those objects that are most stimulating, while offering very little or none of the actual reward we need. So this is what, in essence, you know, is happening here. This is a supernormal stimulus, and it's again, it's got some serious potential harm. So Edward Castronova says that this world, he says that these things, that these supernormal stimuli that make people like Castronova say that there's going to be an exit from the virtual world, and that we're going to more and more go off into the world of Warcraft, the Warcraft game 2021 had 5.2 million monthly players. And so, you know, it's there is some that say, you know, we are going to have, you know, 2 different realities going on, and we need to be aware of this direction. Again, there's 2 sides of the coin with this world of virtual reality. My wife, my to-be ex-wife, she is a psychologist that works for the VA, and she works in studies that do this kind of work, which is said to have some serious positivity to people who are suffering from post-traumatic stress, and giving them and what it does is that in virtual reality, what they're doing is exposing soldiers who come back from the wars, giving them ability to be exposed to their fears. It's kind of like, you know, when a child is scared, there's something scary underneath their bed or in a closet. You open it up and expose them to it and show that there's nothing there. Well, virtual reality is a way of helping them accomplish that, overcoming their fears of what they experienced. And so, yes, virtual goggles is something that, you know, has moved from price from thousands of dollars to $300 a set. So it's not the answer to mental health issues, but it's definitely a tool that could be used in a mental health crisis like we're experiencing today. Finally, another sort of, to end on a positive note, another use of technology is, virtual technology is in journalism. Just show a minute of this.
You really can hear how that event unfolded and what the experience was like for people who were there. In order to do the body capture and make sure that we could reproduce our witness exactly as she really was, we use a light stage. And the light stage means that we can capture somebody in a 360-degree way and make sure we get every natural nuance of their physical presence. So the virtual reality goggles actually have like a tracking system with these bright cherry red lights that the cameras can read, and they know exactly where you're looking in space. And that is what's key to making you feel comfortable. Despite the fact that the graphics seem limited or that we don't actually yet have completely photoreal characters and environments, it's amazing how experiencing through your body allows you to suspend any questions and you actually feel like it's real. Klaus Schwab, who's the head of the World Economic Forum, came through my lab at USC and did hunger. He took off the goggles and turned to me and said, "Can you build me something on Syria?" It is another very powerful story, again using material that was captured on scene. It's a two-part piece that puts you in a corner in Aleppo when a mortar shell hits, a young girl is singing, and you really can hear the pain and the chaos of the ensuing event.
So the potential of this for journalists and anthropologists is pretty interesting. It has the ability to, we've talked about how media has a way of impotence, of like exposing viewers to horrific events and then just leaving them, apathetic. In this case, you really are bringing the story to life in a sense, and bringing people, people can become witnesses of a story, and it potentially has the ability to build empathy. So any thoughts or questions about this? We're going to pick this subject up again on Tuesday next week in the classroom. I can guarantee we'll be back in the classroom unless I'll take that back. No guarantees in this world, but I really feel pretty confident we're going to be back in the classroom. I will send out an email to confirm that Monday, but yeah, let's plan on being in the classroom unless you hear differently from me. Yeah, y'all have a good weekend, a good long weekend. It's my dean reminded me this morning that we actually have a day off on Mondays, so enjoy your long weekend and be safe and stay healthy. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye-bye. Have a good weekend.